Well, hello everyone. My name is Alex Edgar, and I am a sophomore at UC Berkeley. I hope you're all enjoying the fifth annual Reagan Institute Summit on Education. And I'll introduce myself further in a moment. But I'd like to begin by welcoming you all to today's student roundtable on youth voter turnout. Today, I'll be joined by a group of fellow students who are members of the RISE Student Advisory Council. They're joining us from around the country, representing diverse educational and personal backgrounds, but they share a common passion for education and our democracy. We'll be discussing our personal experiences with civic engagement and sharing advice on how to increase youth voter turnout. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And without further ado, let's start introductions. So I think first, let's have Lydia introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Lydia Noteman. I am 17 years old and I'm going to be a senior at Kaufman High School in Columbus, Ohio. I haven't picked out a major or minor yet, but as far as higher education, I'm interested in pursuing international relations and global education policy.
Thank you, Lydia. Annalese.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annalese Cahill. I'm 21 years old, and I'm an incoming senior and student body president at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. My major is called Philosophy, Politics, and the Public. I have a minor in Political Communication. And I also am working part-time now for the mayor of Cincinnati, Abtab Purable, who represents 64 public schools within the city limits and some of the 134 private schools in the Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati region. So I am here today talking about and learning about the ways that electoral politics selects the people that will impact our education system. And I'm very excited to have that conversation with everyone here today.
Thank you so much. Next to Austin.
Hey everybody, my name is Austin Ezzard. I am 20 years old. I currently attend Virginia Commonwealth University. I currently am a social work major with a minor in public management. And I'm still kind of uncertain about my career path, but you know, it's a long-winded discovery, but I am looking to be involved in public service for sure.
I definitely feel that part, Austin. Thank you. Next, let's pass it to Thais.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thais Estrada Nunez. I'm 17 years old. I'm an incoming senior at School for Advanced Studies High School in Miami, Florida. And in terms of career path, while I'm not sure, I know that I'm interested in public health policy and education policy as well.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Ferrero, and I go to School for Advanced Studies in Miami. I'm 16 years old, and I plan to major in public policy and minor in computer science.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And introduction of myself. My name is, again, Alex Edgar. I am 19 years old, and at UC Berkeley, I major in political science with minors in public policy and education. And I'm also the director of the Vote Coalition there. So career path, similar to Austin, not 100% sure where I want to go, but I know I'm definitely really passionate about civic engagement and education, and really how can we connect with my generation, Gen Z, in the best ways possible. But with that, again, it's wonderful to have all of these council members here today. But before we start asking questions to our participants about their civic experiences, I just want to share a few recent statistics about the youth vote. According to the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, 50% of eligible voters aged 18 to 29 participated in 2020, compared to 39% in 2016. In similar good news, the percent of Generation Z and millennials who made donations, contacted public officials, volunteered, or protested, aka those who were civically engaged outside of voting, has steadily been on the rise since 2012 and reached a new high in 2020. With that in mind, our first question for our advisory council members is, why are you passionate about our democracy? And as our oldest member, I'd like to start off with Annalese.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. And I think those statistics are really important. When I think about American democracy, I think back to some of my role models. And this is a very unique one, but my number one role model is Malala Yousafzai, who everyone is pretty familiar with at this point. She was shot by the Pakistani Taliban because of her advocacy for women and girls' education. And I think about my experience growing up here in the United States, in American democracy, where I got to focus on my interests and my goals and my future, rather than carrying the weight of fear because of my gender and my environment. And growing up in that way as a young woman and being encouraged by my family and my government to attend school from the age of 5 until now, I can explore different beliefs, different languages, different perspectives. It inspires me so much more now to be civically engaged and to get others to vote and others to try and work on campaigns and volunteer, and to realize how important electoral politics are to our democracy. So I'm just so grateful for my upbringing in American democracy and the opportunity it provides, specifically in the realm of education, and the opportunities that we can have in electoral politics to make sure we're doing everything we can. So that's why I love it.
And with that, we'll open the floor to the other council members to put in their opinions on it.
Great. So,
Pardon me, go ahead, Austin.
I appreciate it. I would say for me, I'm passionate about democracy generally because it is our way of life, you know. But however, for many centuries, people of color, particularly Black people in this country, were not able to participate in the system completely. Because for our democracy to flourish, there has to be bounds and limits and ability to define who we as the people are for it to be a sustainable democracy. The issue arises when we base who is and isn't included on things like age, race, sexuality, or gender. Though exclusion based on these traits has been done in the past, and there continues to be an issue of disenfranchisement and marginalization in this country. So I'm interested in creating a more inclusive and collaborative environment that our democracy requires. And I believe that the best avenue to do this is through education, where students can be taught the values of our democracy, such as inclusivity, individualism, and collaboration.
I'd be happy to share now. Something that I'm passionate about in our democracy is just the diversity of our country. And that sounds really cliche, but I think about the people that I'm friends with and the experiences that I've had through, through my life. And our democracy has given us the opportunity to become an incredibly diverse country where all different types of people are able to pursue their passions and their interests and their goals in life. And I feel like it's important that we recognize that that is what's so valuable about our democracy, and that's what runs our democracy, is our diversity and our breadth of experience. And these things are really important to how we continue to pursue our democracy. I think it's important to recognize those things.
Hi, so in terms of democracy, the reason why I'm passionate about not only learning how democracy works in our system in the US, but also how there's room to grow in our system with there still being systemic barriers, as Austin mentioned, to minority groups. So the reason why I'm interested in pursuing and learning more about ways that we can help improve our democracy is to ensure that not only our voices listened to and voiced, but also that the legislation in place expresses it on a daily basis.
I think education plays a huge role in democracy, and obviously education at school, elementary school, is our platform for our growth and whatever we do in the future in our careers. So I think it's really important to include that in our education and teach students how democracy is part of our lives and how important it is, and all the different factors of it, the different types of democracy. And I think students play a huge role in how they participate in their extracurriculars and their form of leadership. And that's a huge part of democracy.
Thank you all. And Rachel, what you just said about, students playing such an important role in our democracy, I know that's one of my reasons why I'm so passionate about civics as a whole, is because I feel, we, as we're coming and getting older as a generation, our electoral power, it grows and grows. And we, got to start taking ownership of our politics, of our votes and voices, and trying to, use them to make the difference that we want to see in the world. And that, kind of leads into the next part, which is, in your guys' opinion, what are the best methods to increase youth voter turnout? And anyone is free to answer this based on, as we said before, our very diverse experiences across the country.
I think canvassing is a huge part of this because I've gone canvassing and some people just vote to vote. They don't know what that person or that politician stands for, what they believe in, what they're going to fight for. They just vote to vote, maybe because their parents or a relative of them just votes for them, so they just go, or they don't even vote at all. And I think voting is so important because it's obviously who's going to be in office representing you. So I think canvassing plays a huge role in that.
I can speak to the experience of someone who's not turned 18 yet. I'm 17 years old, but in the state I live in Ohio, 17-year-olds are able to vote in the primary elections if they will be 18 by the general election. So in March of this year, or maybe April, I don't remember, I had the opportunity to vote for the first time. And first of all, it was really cool. But the important thing that I think comes from that is that I had a lot of friends who didn't even know that they could vote in the primaries. And I think that civic education and voter education is important for this because it's hard for youth voters to turn out if they don't even know they can. And so improving the public information and public announcements about special circumstances that you might not realize you can vote under, I think that would be helpful in improving voter turnout among young people.
Lydia, I think that's a really interesting point you make about educating high schoolers specifically, because once you start that habit, you start that pattern, it really sticks. And I can speak from, I guess, the elder, being 21 years old. But I spent 15 months of my college career campaigning and thinking about the college population. I campaigned once for a congressional candidate, once for a mayoral candidate. They were very different experiences, but both times the precincts of our two major college campuses in Cincinnati, at Xavier and University of Cincinnati, had some of the lowest turnout in their precincts, and especially in the local races. And when I analyze it, I think it's really hard to mobilize college students for two major reasons. One is that many of them don't know that they can change their voter address. Once they go to college, you can vote from your school. And many of them maybe aren't motivated to change their addresses or vote with an absentee ballot just because of the effort. And also, I've read some statistics that Gen Z doesn't have as much faith in elected officials or institutions as our predecessors do, which might not motivate them either. So the best way I think to mobilize youth voters is to connect them with issues that directly impact them, and to also make it as easy as possible to vote. And I think in tandem with those two ideas, we can really increase the voter turnout in our generation. We've seen from the statistics you brought up earlier, Alex, that we're already doing a good job engaging people and that there's a lot of energy around this right now. But if candidates are talking primarily about issues like Social Security or healthcare costs or the budget deficit, those might not be as attractive to our generation because they don't impact us quite yet in the ways that they will in the future. So starting conversations around student debt and climate and inflation and things that we're going to see day to day will help people that maybe aren't as typically civically engaged as people involved in politics, like a lot of us, become more in touch with their local and federal and state races. So I think those are some of the ideas I've thought about in my time campaigning. But another way, someone brought up canvassing earlier, is hopping on a campaign and just spend an afternoon knocking doors, even if it's not something you're interested in, because a lot of those times those conversations with voters can energize people to care a lot more about their races.
And I'd say I definitely agree with what you just said, Annalese. I think, there is a large difference in what interests our generation versus others, and trying to reach students really where they are is super important. You know, sometimes we see politicians using trying to reach out to Gen Z voters on social media and just not truly understanding what they're doing there. And I think that's kind of one big thing for me, is that the best way to increase youth voter turnout is to allow students to lead the efforts for youth voter turnout. You know, we have this wonderful roundtable here today, and you know, each one of us is involved in some way in youth voter turnout, and it's because, you know, we're passionate about those issues, right? The passionate about the issues a lot of our peers are, and by, you know, really enabling students to, whether it's through a, you know, leadership position on some sort of coalition or campaign, or even just having something like this. We are all very lucky to be part of the RISE Advisory Council, and you know, they're giving us the opportunity to have our voices heard in something that's, you know, larger than we are. And I think it's moves like this that inspire students to go to the turn out to vote, and inspire their friends to turn out to vote. So really, you know, believe in our generation as we, you know, try to get our first tastes of democracy.
I totally agree with you. And I think, to your point of allowing young people to step into these leadership positions, when you look at the majority of campaigns, the staffers and the people involved are typically under the age of like 25 or 30. And to get your foot in the door on a campaign, you don't need to have all of this knowledge outside of being able to have one-on-one conversations with people, being able to navigate maps when you're canvassing. There's such easy ways to get involved with campaigns where you can just have your door open to so much more about finance or communications or and organizing. And I think giving young people those skills and allowing them to take such responsibility at this age is a way too that we're going to engage a lot of people.
Well, I'll hop in and ask the next few questions. So far, we've discussed our individual experiences and passions, but in order to understand youth voter turnout, it's important to understand what makes us tick. So, what are some common misconceptions about the youth electorate, do you think? And what do adults get wrong about us?
So I'll say that in my personal experience, and just in general, I believe that a common misconception that I found is that people believe that the youth in general are not as intelligent, or are just uncritical and passive beings, not capable of handling, you know, complex subjects, telling us things like, oh, you can't handle that, or you're too young to be talking or knowing about that, or even, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. When we've really got more of an understanding on these issues and topics that are more, I would say, seasoned counterparts.
To that too, Austin, I kind of had three that I was thinking of in my head. The first is that we're only focused on social issues or the more attractive issues that are more on the Instagram graphics. Two, that we only engage by posting these useless Instagram graphics. And three, that we get all of our information from Twitter and other social media outlets. And I agree. I think every civically engaged teenager, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, has heard from an adult, oh, you'll grow out of this political belief. Oh, you'll grow up one day and realize that that's not actually the case. And it's extremely patronizing and uncomfortable. And everyone does have the freedom to change their mind, but the assumption that young people are somehow less than and that our beliefs are less than because of our age is something that's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of our generation. And I think also social media is very new and it's a very powerful tool in the realm of misinformation, but just as easily it can inform, just like it can disinform. So I think as long as our generation takes social media and uses it as a tool to engage people and to put information out there and to organize, like we know that we can, there's a positive route that we can take in this direction. Because while adults might see Instagram graphics as performative, and we can get into that conversation another day, but like it or not, that is a way to organize, to have people come together and posting things by the droves and millions about a statement or a current event. Like, that's a form of organizing. So it's maybe different from the way that people before us organized, but it doesn't mean that it's the wrong way. And I think it can be really, really powerful.
Going back to something else Austin said, I agree with you, Annalese, and I'll take his response in a different direction. I really resonated with what you said about how older people don't take us seriously and don't think that we understand our stake in this. And I have had a personal experience with this with local civics, with my local school board, and trying to encourage our school board to adopt a student representative, and they were very resistant and thinking that we didn't know what we were talking about, or that we didn't understand how politics at the local level worked, when in reality we understand the decisions they're making and how they impact our day-to-day lives. And I think that that's a common misconception, is that we don't really understand what's going on, when in reality a lot of us do.
Yeah, I also like 100% agree with that point, because I can't tell you the number of times it's been, wait until you pay taxes, or, wait until you're paying for your own health insurance, or, whatever. And I'm sure we can all say, like, it's a little bit demeaning to be told that, because it is true what Annalise said about, we may be doing different methods for it, right? We may be, posting an Instagram graphic instead of putting a poster up in person. But we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Like, that was pretty much our only option of how to organize, of how to reach out to voters. And I know from my experience, like, seeing so many of my peers being engaged in the conversation, whether it was about COVID or about any of the, numerous political happenings during the 2020 election, or COVID pandemic as a whole, like, knowing that there were other people who are equally as interested in what's going on and are equally as passionate about learning more. These infographics, as I think Annalise said, like, they might be, it's just misinformation. It's just, someone's pretty little Canva subscription, working out on that. But in all honesty, I know I learned a lot from reading them. Students are more likely to be on social media than they are to read a newspaper. So where are they going to get this information but from social media? And I think that brings more into how can we better ensure that, social media graphics are fact checked and whatever else. And as Annalise said, that could be an entire conversation. But I do think, just kind of similar to the last question, like, trusting students, trusting young people to, learn and grow on their own, and also helping them in that process, and really empowering them to, be more involved in, like, Lydia, the school board, or I think Annalise said, like, student government, right? Like, these are all ways for students to, start getting that first experience with democracy. And I think that is one thing we can kind of start changing the misconception about us.
Yes, I agree. Like, there's a big misconception that the beliefs we currently have and what we think and perceive the world around us, and like the legislation and policy we support or advocate for, are bound to change in the future once we, for example, get a job, start a family, and reach other milestones in our life. Like, that's a big argument often adults have when we start a conversation about civic engagement and policy work and how it impacts us on a daily basis. So in terms of that misconception, like, yes, obviously, like, our perspectives will change and mold as we grow and experience new milestones in our lives, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a complete 180 from what we currently believe. And that doesn't invalidate what we currently support and what we currently advocate for. Like all of you said, like, social media, it not only allows a broader reach for civic engagement, but it also provides a platform to voice your own, beliefs in, for people that might listen to you, because in your life you might not have people that support you in terms of, and you might not be able to have I guess a nice conversation with the people around you, but social media provides a platform to voice your beliefs and opinions, and also it makes the conversation for civic engagement exponentially bigger and more broad reach.
So we've talked about this a little bit already, and especially with Thais and Alex and Annalise, your references to social media. But how can high schools specifically better support their students in civic engagement and pre-registering to vote?
I think that so I'm still in high school, and there should definitely be a course or at least like a speaker that comes and tells us about this stuff, because I go out and research and I talk to my friends about this, but school doesn't teach us anything about this, along with like finances and stuff. Like we know nothing about that. And although we have a government course, that's just the history. And that's like the past presidents, you know, the electoral process, all of that. But it's not actually how we can participate and how we can pre-register to vote. And it doesn't teach us anything about that. And I think that should definitely be something that should be incorporated like as soon as possible.
I think that, sorry, you can go.
I came from a high school where, as part of our government course, we were required to do 10 campaign hours to graduate. And I think that it was, I mean, in the moment, and this is before I was really super engaged. I was like, oh my gosh, you're telling me I have to go out on my weekend and I have to knock doors in this neighborhood that I've never been to. And it just did not sound appealing. And then I did it for the first time and I was like, oh my God, this candidate is running on things that I really, really care about. And I just went and knocked on someone's door and told them how to vote, when to vote, and for who, and had a conversation about it. And it just is like a wave of adrenaline. It was such an incredible experience. So having that as a required component can really help people get that on their radar. And then also having things like taking days off school for election days, even if your school isn't a polling location, having registration be part of your college admission process, and just having one form that says, hey, are you registered to vote? Did you know you can register here? Supporting clubs at schools like College Dems, College Republicans, et cetera, all the other clubs that can form from other parties. There are ways that students can support engagement without the ways that sometimes people think of, like, oh, make your school a polling location, or just educate people on what the electoral process is, like you were saying, Rachel.
Yeah, so I agree with both Rachel and Annalese. And another thing is that, like, going back to Rachel's comment about, while there is a requirement, for example, in my state, that you take like an American history or government class, a lot of those courses, again, are based on history and not specifically about modern times and how current policy and current legislation, which is always obviously fluctuating, affects us on a daily basis. So, and further than that, not about the time period, is that also there's not a lot of education in terms of our local politicians, which most directly impact us on a daily basis. So whether that be like on a county level, your local commissioner, a lot of people can't even name those people, even though those people are the ones that, you know, interact with them with policy and legislation even closer. And, you know, even like with your school board, like knowing who your school board members are, knowing what they stand for. And because a lot of times, like, people don't even know like the difference between closed primary and open primary, which can be extremely harmful when you're like pre-registering or registering to vote, because like what you put down matters in terms of what the information you put down. And so I think that lack of information, that gap that comes with like youth voters, especially in high school, who think like, oh, I'm not eligible to vote yet, so it's okay, I can do it like next year, it doesn't matter, is also realizing like everyone has their civic power and everyone is able to have an impact on the people around them. So, you know, the earlier you start learning about your local politicians, the more powerful your reach is with what you believe in and what you want to advocate for. So I think, yeah, like holding conversation is essential and important. More something of the American history / government class.
Okay, well, while high schools have the ability to, foster student civic engagement before most of them are eligible to vote, college campuses, they receive students as often fresh participants in our democracy. And due to this, one's civic education and outreach in college is critical to their continued voter turnout. So now this is turned to the college students on our roundtable. From your experience, how can colleges and universities better support their students in civic engagement and voter turnout?
I'll say that having specific offices and departments in your actual institution, assists with trying to get community engagement and helping to get some civic engagement going on. I believe at my institution, Virginia Commonwealth University, they have different student faculty and staff representatives around campus who are part of the VCU Votes Network, to promote voter engagement on campus and just to promote, more community involvement in the Richmond community. So I believe like having an actual office at your institution could assist with, trying to get your students to be civically engaged.
I think that's really interesting, Austin. Recently, this past year, my school launched a program. We call it our Take It On initiative, and it's a bipartisan civic engagement initiative that their big launch was hosting a mayoral debate. Our mayoral elections were last year, and they brought both candidates to our campus to have debate where students were invited to submit questions. We toyed with the idea, which we ended up not doing because of a COVID rise, but having a city council roundtable. We ended up inviting candidates to campus for a different reason, but to engage with students. They were allowed to hand out their literature within confined spaces. They're just examples of things like that, bringing people to register voters onto campus to stand outside the dorms like the week before the registration deadline. Having a point of contact on campus that's responsible for students knowing what they're doing when it comes to voter engagement has been critical for our campus. And it's been a year of this program and it's already making really substantial change. So I think having a group or a point person or a program to be responsible for that, just so someone consistently and sustainably is equipping students with that information, is going to be really helpful as we move forward, and hopefully more colleges are looking into that.
Definitely. And I know from my experience in California, luckily, the state Secretary of State and Governor's office have both been, very responsive and very helpful in working with the state colleges. Part of the University of California system, but also the CSU system and the California Community College system. They've been really helpful in partnering with our schools about making them designated, polling places and working to, there was a little bill passed, I believe, that made sure that each college campus needed to have a designated kind of civic contact on campus to ensure that there was someone who was in charge of that. And like, I think Austin was talking about having a center, a physical space that, is related to civics. I feel like those are all, very important steps, but also, just colleges and universities just making sure that voter registration and voting itself are a part of your calendar year. I know there's different schools have different policies with it, but whether it's having a non-student day on election day, especially in states that may not have the same mail-in ballot accessibility, that's one really great option. Or even if it's a fully virtual day of classes, so that gives students the ability to go to their polling place and beyond just getting to their polling place, also just engage in the great democratic process and participate in the election. So I definitely think that is a big part of it. And then for our sadly final question, this is going to be for all of the advisory council members. You could each just give a brief kind of final comment. It can be a piece of advice related to civics, an article to read, an organization to follow, something. We'll try to keep it into like under a minute.
I guess I will go first. I'll say, as a piece of advice, I'll say, if you preach inclusivity, then be inclusive, period. Include everyone and everybody, all perspectives and all viewpoints, all races and all ethnicities, all abilities and all disabilities, ideologies and all ideologies and all religions. We've grown as a society into such separate and isolated silos and subgroups where we cannot even handle novel experiences or new viewpoints anymore. And we've actually become very weary of those experiences or those viewpoints. Though, of course, as human beings, we're all very much alike, and we must learn and find those commonalities again and come together as an American culture. And I believe this can be done through inclusion and inclusive dialogue.
Going off what Alex said, I would say we can't forget that the strength of our democracy is our diversity and is the breadth of experience and understanding and opportunity. And so, in the same vein that we need to be inclusive, we need to appreciate that our diversity is what makes us the strong democracy that we are.
I think if I were to offer a concluding thought, a motto that I try to live by every single day is to think global and act local. No matter your age or your location or your job or your previous involvement, you can make a difference at home so much easier than you think you can. If you're worried about something like national crime rates, if you have a more personal issue like a family member struggling to pay for adequate health care, it seems like a problem that's much bigger than you, and it's national and it's international, but it's not. And you can knock doors and you can donate and you can make calls to get people elected that can fight for you. And it can start before you can even vote. Like we see the people on this call who aren't even 18 yet, who are so involved. And it's easy to be intimidated by these bigger issues, but you don't have to be. There are a group of people who want to inspire voters and to engage voters at every age. And the best part about our democracy is that you can change these issues without being inside of our nation's capital in Washington. You can do them right from your home. So I would encourage anybody listening, if you aren't super previously involved before, you know someone who you think would be good, to reach out as far as you can and as wide as you can to help engage everyone you can to help our democracy grow.
Just like Annalese said, please participate in any way you can. There's so many ways, whether it's phone banking, canvassing, whatever, as like a walkout. There's so many ways that you can participate and be a part of everything. The government, small, local, you can talk to your school board, or you're in school board. It's to start in high school, start in your student government, then move on from that, grow from that, and participate in any way that you can.
So yeah, so it's important to realize that everyone in the US has a power to make change. And no matter your age, your background, your voice matters. And it's okay to be loud about it. It's okay to talk to your peers about it. It's okay to be proud of what you believe in and what you stand for. So don't be afraid to start conversations, to start initiatives, because everyone's voice matters. Because some people, the person next to you might be too shy or might be too quiet to speak out about it. So you don't know how many people identify with your cause and would be better off for it. So just be, loud and be courageous in your efforts in defending what you believe in.
Well, my piece of advice is listen to what they just said. And as much as I know I would love to have this conversation for hours longer, and I'm sure, if we were in person, we'd probably be talking outside of the room for a while after. We unfortunately have to bring this roundtable to a close. So I'd like to thank all of the RISE Student Advisory Council members for sharing their invaluable insight and experiences with this group. This experience would have been nowhere near as incredible as it was without your guys' participation. Student voices play an integral role in our democracy, and I'm confident that this group will go on to do incredible things for our country. And I know I speak for all of them when I say feel free to reach out later and continue this dialogue with any of us, as we are always happy to discuss our passion for democracy. I'd also like to thank my fellow moderator, Lydia, for ensuring everything went seamlessly today. And finally, on behalf of the entire RISE Student Advisory Council, I'd like to thank you all so much for coming to our roundtable, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the panels. Thank you all so much.